Good morning and good afternoon all. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Fleets for the Future Gaseous Fuels Procurement webinar. My name is Sarah Reed, Program Coordinator at the National Association of Regional Councils. If you should have any technical questions during the webinar, please email Cameron or myself. Our emails are Sarah, S-A-R-A-H, @narc.org, and Cameron, C-A-M-E-R-O-N, @narc.org. There will be time for questions and discussions at the end of the presentation. If you have a question during the presentation, please type it into the question box on your control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Please note that a recording of the webinar will be available and that you can download the slides right now in the control panel under Handouts, also on the right-hand side. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Philip Krajcik from Cadmus, our technical lead on this project, as well as Barry Carr from Clean Communities of Central New York. I will now turn it over to Philip to get us started.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. Really excited to talk with you about the gaseous fuel contracts that are available through Fleets for the Future and a little bit about the project, and then turn it over to Barry Carr to describe some procurement best practices related to gaseous fuels. Cameron, could you advance 2 slides and actually jump straight into the poll? I wanted to, so my name is Philip Krajcik and I am an associate at the Cadmus Group. As Sarah mentioned, we're the technical leads on this project. But before I jumped into describing the project, I wanted to get a sense of the audience, in particular, whether you've already attended a Fleets for the Future webinar. I'll give you about 20 seconds to answer this. All right, Cameron, you want to see what the results say? Okay, I was expecting a mixed response, and that's about what, so that's helpful for me as I calibrate what I described today. We will still go over Fleets for the Future and the concept behind it, but I'll try to keep it relatively brief. So next slide, Cameron. And next, to jump into the goals. So as many of you know, Fleets for the Future is a DOE-sponsored project that mission is to reduce the cost of procuring alternative fuel vehicles for fleets by using cooperative procurement methods to obtain competitive pricing. We do this through aggregating demand in regions and nationally, and we're focused on propane, electric, and compressed natural gas vehicles and associated infrastructure. In addition to the work to aggregate demand, we're also developing resources to guide participating fleets through their procurement implementation, as well as cataloging lessons learned to enable future cooperative procurement initiatives to thrive. Next slide. So I'll go through this, next slide. Can everyone see the slide? I think maybe there's a lag. Okay, on the project design, I'll go through it quickly because I'm sure that many of you are sensitive to the barriers to alternative fuel vehicle deployment in public fleets, and many of you have already seen our webinars. But essentially, we mapped our project to address the major barriers that we perceive. First off, we have to address the high upfront costs. We're leveraging collective buying power across the country. Second, to build trust, we really wanted to make sure that we're perceived as impartial, and as such, we're applying a fuel agnostic approach, looking to help fleets find the best vehicle for their specific use cases and applications rather than having vendors pitch specific products to them. And third, to reduce the challenge of overcoming status quo thinking, we've focused on time savings for fleet managers. In particular, we're working to provide template language and cooperative contracts to accelerate fleets' ability to procure vehicles. Next slide, please. So we're working on 2 parallel scales, as I mentioned, working with a national cooperative agency called Sourcewell, as well as working with local regional procurements. And on the national scale, any public fleet in the country is eligible to join. And on the regional scale, most of these are projects that were developed by specific regional councils, and they're typically available only to local public fleets with a few exceptions. Next slide. Here are the geographies that we are working in on Fleets for the Future. So if you are listening in from Arizona, Texas, the Washington, D.C. region, or the Northeast, or the region around Kansas City, you may wish to reach out to some of our project collaborators to learn about some of the work that they've done and ways that you can get involved and take advantage of their regional contracts. The rest of this webinar is going to focus mainly on the national scale opportunities. So next slide, and advance 2 slides here. There's 2 categories of products and deliverables from this project that I think will be useful for you. One is our educational resources, and the other is the contracts themselves. Here's a snapshot of some of the best practices that we wrote. These are documents that range from about 20 to 50 pages that go over a lot of the technical details associated with procurement of these types of vehicles. Next slide. This slide shows an outline of some of the topics that are covered, and actually the gaseous fuel vehicle guide follows a very similar outline to the presentation that you'll be seeing today. So if you find this useful, you can find more in-depth information in that guide, and you can find a similar guide on electric vehicles, as well as some general best practice guides around financing strategies and basic transition planning and prioritization of your alternative fuel programs. Next slide. So jumping into the contracts that are available that arose from this project, on the national scale, there's light-duty alternative fuel vehicles and electric vehicles, both from OEMs and turnkey offerings that are produced by upfitters. And we also have medium and heavy-duty fuel vehicles. I'll show you a couple examples there, as well as EV charging, leasing solutions for all of the above. And finally, we're in the final stages of an RFP that we worked with Sourcewell on that will hopefully result in having some more specific fleet management providers that can provide leasing solutions and can monetize tax credits, particularly for the electric vehicles that you may be looking to procure. On the regional side, you may want to look at Massachusetts. Just as a note, Massachusetts' contracts are available nationwide as well. Other than that, if you are in the other regions, you can see there's a couple specific opportunities in Kansas City and Washington, D.C. Next slide. So I've inserted this really as something that you can have for reference after the webinar, but essentially I wanted to share with you that the OEMs that are available on the Sourcewell contract. This table summarizes the CNG and propane autogas refuse haulers and school buses and other vehicles that are available, as well as the electric school buses that are available. Next slide. This slide also shows whether they supply the body or the cabin chassis, and whether you can get a full vehicle from them directly. The nice thing that I want to mention about these contracts is that they're designed to be full catalog, and the vendors can add new products as they come up, new model years and new offerings, as long as they align with the solicitation category that was originally awarded to the vendor. So that means that if you're interested, for instance, say in Navistar's new IC electric school bus that is going to be commercially available in 2019 or 2020, it's likely going to be an option through Sourcewell directly. Or if there's, for instance, on the refuse hauler side of things, a specific Labrie platform that you want, and you want to mix and match it with a different body, you can likely arrange for it as long as one of those vendors is on the contract. Next slide. Here's just a broader list. There's a couple additional vendors that may be useful for you as well, so you can refer to this later. And next slide. I wanted to start to transition towards Barry's talk about specific best practices on gaseous fuels by providing this motivation here, particularly to talk a little bit about the timeliness of the Environmental Mitigation Trust Fund funding opportunity. I'm sure you're all aware of it right now, the money that's available for repowering or replacing diesel engines with gaseous fuels. But as a reminder, it's an opportunity for class 4 to 8 vehicles, and there's 10 eligible actions. The program overall has limits for the various technologies and the various actions. But the individual states have a fair amount of control over their program and often provide more prescriptive guidelines. And as you're all probably well aware, this funding is particularly useful for natural gas vehicles and propane upfits. So it's worth listening in to what Barry has to say about how one would go through the process. Next slide. So just a quick update on the timing of the settlement. The trustees have designated their beneficiaries as of the late spring. And as you can see in this timeline on the right, that means that all the states are in the phase of the timeline where they are able to submit their plans, and within 30 days after their plans are submitted, they can start withdrawing their funds. And as you probably know, many states already have submitted plans, in excess of 40 states already. And specifically 15 states have indicated that there's definitely going to be money available within this year. So with that, I'll let Barry talk you through how you might plan a procurement, and he'll cover the benefits of the fuels, the best applications, fueling considerations, and specific procurement processes. So Barry, take it away.
Thank you, Philip, and good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are, everyone. I'm Barry Carr, the coordinator of Clean Communities of Central New York, and I've been involved with this project on two ends, one being a co-author along with Evora and Associates on the Gaseous Fuels Procurement Guide, and the second through my Clean Cities Coalition. I've been involved in doing outreach for almost the last 2 years. So it's been a great project, and I want to thank everyone who's been involved. Next slide, please. First, we're going to talk about the benefits of gaseous fuels vehicles. Some of this may be a repeat of other things that you've heard, but you might as well have the latest and greatest. Next slide, please. Benefits of using gaseous fuel, and by gaseous fuel, I am referring to LPG, propane, CNG, compressed natural gas, and LNG, liquefied natural gas, because liquefied natural gas regasifies and is operated in an internal combustion engine as a gaseous fuel. Benefits are certainly reduced emissions. They are lower carbon fuels, lower fuel costs, because the fuel comes primarily from the United States, about 98% of it, and because we have such a vast glut of natural gas and propane comes up out of the ground with natural gas, the pricing is very predictable now. So if you're a fleet director and you go out and ask for a price for the next 3 years for diesel fuel or gasoline, I doubt you would get anybody to respond to that. I can tell you that the propane auto gas companies and the natural gas infrastructure providers would be happy to give you a price out over the next 3 to 5, perhaps as long as 8 years. That leads me to reduce volatility. Again, because of the glut of natural gas here in the United States, the price is very much independent of the price of oil, gasoline, or diesel. And in the long term, in the majority of cases, the maintenance cost is lower on a dedicated propane or a dedicated natural gas vehicle. Part of this is because, again, the fact that they are lower carbon fuels, and part of it is because if you're replacing a diesel engine, your emission system is a lot simpler. So you no longer have to use diesel emission fluid. You no longer have to use diesel particulate filters in your maintenance procedure. So assuming you're the right fleet for this, these are fleets that drive a significant number of miles or come back to the same location every day. They do offer a lower total cost of ownership. And if you add in available grants or tax incentives, it can be a very sound economical decision as well as a sound environmental decision. Next, please. In reduced emissions, natural gas vehicles and propane auto gas vehicles both produce less emissions. It's anywhere from 30 to 60% of criteria pollutants. That would be NOx and particulate matter. And it is in the range of 25 to 30% reduction in greenhouse gases compared to gasoline or diesel fuel. Next slide, please. The reduced volatility versus gasoline and diesel. We talked about this a couple slides ago, but natural gas is primarily domestically produced. A tiny amount still comes from Canada and Trinidad, Tobago. And the past decade has seen a growing supply as more and more areas are developed. I happen to live in part of that area where the Marcellus Shale produces a lot of natural gas. And again, with the natural gas comes up propane, butane, ethane, and a number of other things. But the ability of us to mine for natural gas in the United States has made the price very, very competitive. It has also made the propane price very, very competitive. Next slide, please. Lower fuel costs. Vehicular natural gas and propane autogas both enjoy pump price advantage compared to gasoline and diesel. The differential on the natural gas side is typically 20 to 60%. Those of you who know me know that I drive a natural gas vehicle. I can tell you that I pay anywhere from about 99 cents a gallon up to about $2.29 a gallon. And that equates to anywhere from a 50-cent cost savings over gasoline to about a $2 cost savings over gasoline. And you can also refuel natural gas vehicles at home. I have a residential refueling appliance at my house, and I can fill my truck up at a rate of about 30 cents a gallon. The propane gas differential is somewhere in the range of 30 to 50%, and this is completely tied to volume. So if you are a fleet operator, you would just figure out how many miles per year each vehicle that you're going to operate on propane uses. You would go out and competitively procure that propane based upon the total volume. The more you use, the less expensive it is. Propane also has an advantage in natural gas in that the infrastructure is very inexpensive and sometimes can be provided free of cost. So the local propane distributor would probably be happy to drop a propane refueling system on a skid in your driveway and hook it up for you. The differential does vary by region, and it also varies by the component cost of each fuel. By that I mean that on the natural gas side, there are some areas of the country where the price is subsidized by a utility. So a natural gas utility may own your infrastructure. That's the case with New Jersey Natural Gas and South Jersey Gas. Both of them are offering fuel to the public for about $1.79 a gallon, and to a fleet for anywhere from $1.29 to $1.39 per gallon. Next slide, please. Lower maintenance costs. Lower maintenance costs on LDVs, that's light duty vehicles, medium duty vehicles, heavy duty vehicles, and all of this depends upon the duty cycle of the vehicle. There are options for servicing them. So if you have a heavy duty natural gas or propane engine, that's typically a Cummins manufactured. Cummins is the OEM, or an 8.9 and 11.9 liter engine that goes in medium and heavy duty vehicles. They have their own authorized service centers. People like Westport and Roush and Landy Renzo and Eltec Eco, they are support companies to OEMs like Ford and General Motors. They have their own authorized installation departments and technical service departments. And then finally, if you're a decent sized fleet and you're making an investment in natural gas or propane vehicles and have your own ASE certified technicians on staff, the companies that provide and manufacture and develop these systems are happy to train you in maintaining and servicing them. There are no federal requirements for this. There are some state requirements depending on where you're located. And at the end of this presentation, you'll see my contact information. If you have a specific question about a specific state for either natural gas or propane, please feel free to ask it. Thank you. Next slide, please. Best applications and why. Next slide. As I mentioned before, the very best applications for almost any alternative fuel, whether it's propane, natural gas, hydrogen, or electricity, are vehicles that run the same route every day, and those vehicles also return to the same base every day. So think of a beer distributor, think of a water delivery company, think of a transit bus, think of refuse trucks, think of street sweepers. We have those here in Syracuse where I'm located running on natural gas. Think of shuttle buses. Think of local goods and services, delivery vans and trucks. A delivery van might be a UPS van, a FedEx van, a DHL van. A delivery truck might be, again, water delivery, beer delivery, and things like furniture and mattresses. Those are typically class 5 and 6 vehicles. They come back to a distribution center every night. You also have taxis and police cars because they put a lot of miles on. You have school buses. While they don't put a lot of miles on, they carry our children, and our children deserve to have cleaner air and lower carbon fuels, and school buses come back to the same base every single day. And then utility trucks. Utilities have to meet the Environmental Policy Act of 1992, so they have to utilize alternative fuel vehicles, and quite typically their trucks and vans and sedans come back to the same place every night. And then finally, things like telecom. So your local cable company, your local telephone company that has service vans, those get a lot of miles put on them. They're pretty efficient vehicles, but the fact that they come back to the same place every night makes them very good prospects to utilize either propane or natural gas. This is a good time to also mention fuel diversity. Fuel diversity is a concept that many utilities and authorities are utilizing so they don't rely upon one single fuel. We are having, as a country, more and more natural disasters. These are things like hurricanes, snowstorms in Syracuse where I am, windstorms on the coast. They often end up with being without electricity for a long period of time. And if you don't have electricity, you cannot pump gasoline or diesel fuel out of the tanks. You can typically utilize both propane and natural gas in times of no power because propane stations and natural gas stations typically have propane or a natural gas generator as a backup. A perfect example of this is Superstorm Sandy about 5 years ago. Both natural gas and propane stations were up and operating within 24 hours, whereas you had gasoline and diesel stations that were out for 2 to 3 weeks. I witnessed that personally. I was down delivering gasoline for gasoline-fired generators for convenience stores so they could run their pumps to put gasoline and diesel into vehicles. I was delivering it from a natural gas truck. Next slide, please. Municipal applications. Some of you on the call may be with a municipality. This slide shows vehicle types that are available in both natural gas or propane, sedans, SUVs, crossover vehicles, pickup trucks, light duty vehicles, primarily sedans, and then the class 3 to 6 work trucks. These are things that would have a service body on them, or could be a dump truck or a plow truck. Class 4 to 6 shuttle buses that might be serving airports or senior citizen centers, and of course school buses, refuse trucks, transit buses, and street sweepers all have available from either the OEM or a direct contact of the OEM a natural gas or a propane option. You'll also see on this chart two other terms that you may or may not be familiar with. They are biofuel or dedicated. Biofuel means a vehicle that can run on either gasoline or natural gas or propane, and dedicated means a vehicle that runs either on gasoline full-time or propane full-time or natural gas full-time. They do not run together. They are biofuel. Next slide, please. Some of the available light-duty vehicles and medium-duty vehicles, again, playing off the last slide, these are just good pictures, but you can, through a third party, buy a natural gas or propane-powered sedan or an SUV or a crossover. And then when you get into the cargo and passenger vans, there are companies that work directly with the OEMs. On the Ford side, this would be Landy Renzo, Eltec Eco, Westport, and Roush. And on the General Motors side, it's a company called PSI, Power Systems International. They have agreements in place directly with the OEM. The OEM makes the vehicle with an option called gaseous prep. So certain engine series on every picture you see in here is made with hardened steel components in the engine, particularly the valves. And what that means is that those engines can run safely and with very low maintenance costs and very little damage on a fuel that is burning significantly hotter than gasoline. You will find places, you will find people who may contact you offering you a discount on a natural gas or a propane upfit system. My suggestion to you is to first not do any existing vehicles, and second, to ask those people for proof that they are authorized by the manufacturer of the vehicle to do work on it, and that they also have a valid EPA emission certificate or a CARB, California Air Resource Board emission certificate. And then those final three vehicles down there are class 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 vehicles. They are also available for upfitting. Next slide, please. Especially heavy-duty vehicles. These are vehicles available directly from the OEM and their dealers. People like Freightliner, Kenworth, Peterbilt, Mack, Autocar, Elgin in the street sweeper world, Schwartz, Timco, Capacity, and Kalmar. All these vehicles can be ordered directly from your local dealer with either the 8.9-liter Cummins dedicated natural gas engine in it or the 11.9-liter dedicated natural gas engine from Cummins, or a 6-liter V8 from General Motors, in which various propane and natural gas companies offer systems from. These vehicles are serviced right at the OEM's dealer facility, and make certain that if you're doing this, that you do discuss this with the local dealer. You may run into a dealer that's not familiar with the process. It's simply because it hasn't been asked for before. But with a little bit of prodding, typically you can get them set up as a service center. Next slide, please. Let's go, Cameron. Next slide.
Sorry, it's updating right now. It's lagging a little bit.
I'm talking too fast now. Here we go. These are available bus platforms directly from the OEM. People like New Flyer, which is a very popular transit bus, Eldorado, Gillig, Nova. And then on the school bus side, we have Thomas and Bluebird, and there's also IC. All of these school bus manufacturers are now offering propane and natural gas models, and some of them are starting to offer all-electric models. And again, school bus application is really good for alternative fuels. Next slide, please. Fueling. I'm going to spend a few minutes here discussing basic fueling infrastructure that is required to operate your vehicle on natural gas or propane. Next slide, please. Your first choice as a fleet manager is to utilize existing fueling infrastructure. I am sitting at my desk in Syracuse, New York. Within 5 miles of me are 3 natural gas fueling facilities that are open to the public. The price of those fuels is anywhere from $1.99 to $2.29. There are also 2 dedicated propane refueling facilities. The price is $1.79 per gallon at them. So what I would do if I were a fleet manager is quickly get on the US DOE's alt fuel website and locate where existing facilities may be. Second thing I would do would be to contact that facility, because the pricing that would be listed on both the website or on an app or at the site itself is the price to the general public. Quite often there are significant discounts available based on the volume you're going to be utilizing every month. Another choice for refueling is mobile refueling, or what I refer to as wet fueling. This is where you contract with a company to have either your propane or your natural gas delivered directly to you. So they would bring a truck that would have a tank of liquid propane auto gas or a tank, several tanks of compressed natural gas. They would have access to your facility in off hours, and they would go around to individual vehicles and fill them every single night, or at least 5 times a week while you're using them. That way your people have none of their time tied up in refueling the vehicles, and you do not have the investment of a refueling station. There is a premium for this because, again, you don't have to invest in the fueling station, but you would pay a premium for the fuel to have it delivered to you. The third choice would be to build your own infrastructure. So if you're building your own infrastructure, and we'll go into this a bit further in a few more slides, the first thing you're going to want to do is decide whether or not you're a good candidate for it. Look at your own fleet, look at how much diesel and gasoline you use a year, and then look at what growth you're going to undergo, because if your fleet keeps getting larger, it may make very good sense for you to build your own station. The other thing to consider is the ability to collaborate with others. This is a good reason to keep in touch with your local Clean Cities coordinator. They may know of other like-minded companies that are within 3 to 5 miles of your facility, and if you went in jointly and built a station, you'd be amortizing that cost over 2 to 3 to 4 to maybe 10 different companies. This happens quite a bit in the real world. One of the stations here in central New York, it's actually in Liverpool, New York, was built by a third party. The anchor tenant is Tops, which is a grocery store chain out of Buffalo that tops their vehicles off before they drive up into northern New York and southern New York here in Liverpool. They have since reached out to local beer distributors and furniture delivery companies to add load to their station. That helps save everyone. So it's very important, if you're going to be building your own infrastructure, that you consider all of these different facts. Next slide, please. I mentioned this earlier. We have a site available to the general public, and it is updated on a quarterly basis by the 102 Clean Cities coordinators nationwide. It's called the Alternative Fuel Data Center. It offers location, hours of operation, how you would pay, whether you need a fuel card, whether you need an app, or whether it takes a credit card for EV stations, natural gas stations, propane stations, hydrogen stations, biodiesel stations, and E85 ethanol stations. Next slide, please. Fueling options, CNG, compressed natural gas. There's 2 ways to go, actually 3 ways. I already mentioned the wet fueling technique, whereby a truckload of compressed natural gas will come to your facility. But by and large, most people do one of 2 things or both things. First is time fill. Time fill is a smaller compression system that is set up for multiple vehicles that come back to the same place and sit for a period of time. So think of a refuse truck. This is typically what waste management does. The drivers leave at 4 o'clock in the morning, they unplug their trucks, they drive till 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and come back to base. They simply plug their trucks back into a compression station, turn a valve, and they get filled at a rate of, maybe 4 to 6 gallons per hour. So it's a relatively small compressor. It's a lower cost piece of infrastructure, and it can quite often take advantage of off-peak electricity that's used to compress the fuel. If you're a larger fleet or you're a fleet that's collaborating with groups of other people and you need the ability to fast fuel, and by fast fuel, I'm talking about anywhere from 6 to 8 gallons per minute, just like you would be filling with gasoline or diesel fuel, you're going to want a fast fill station. If you have huge volume, the economics of a fast fill station are better, or if you have access to a grant, the economics are better on a fast fill station. But again, pay attention to that lower figure. You would have to have a minimum of 125,000 gas gallon equivalents per year. And to really have it make good sense, you'd want to look at a total volume of over 300,000 gas gallon equivalents per year. There are third parties that do this. There are companies that finance it for you. There's all sorts of cooperatives. Again, your best avenue for education on this would be your local Clean Cities coordinator. Next slide, please. For propane autogas, this is more similar since it's a liquid fuel. It's similar to gasoline and diesel. The system costs are quite a bit less than natural gas. I didn't mention that on the previous slide, but a natural gas time fill station might start at $50,000 and go up from there. A natural gas fast fill station probably starts at about $1.2 million and goes up from there. But on the propane side, there are tanks and modules of tanks, so multiple tanks that go anywhere from 1,000 gallons up to 50,000 gallons. And quite often, your local propane distributor, and you probably have more than one, they would be happy on a long-term contract to undergo the investment of the station themselves. So they would create this station, which would consist of a pump, a filter, a dispenser, and a tank or several tanks, typically delivered on a skid and then tied into either 120 or 208. That can be on your own property, so it gives you your own infrastructure. Alternatively, there are high-speed propane dispensing stations that are located sometimes at a local U-Haul, sometimes at a local propane provider. They'll have their own station there. So if you're close to one of those, it's simply a matter of getting a contract with them based upon your volume. Next slide, please. Procurement pathways. Next slide. This project was all about aggregated purchase procurement best practices. What we have attempted to do with our partner Sourcewell on the public side is to go out to people who build natural gas and propane vehicles and obtain best pricing from them based upon projected aggregate procurements. What I mean by that is, if you're a group of municipalities, or let's say you're a municipality and you're in an association in your area or in your state, if you could bulk purchase natural gas or propane pickup trucks, service vans, utility vans, school buses, if you did it at the same time, you could come up with a significant savings, because the companies who provide these upfit systems are relatively small companies, and economies of scale are everything to them. Next slide, please. So our aggregated procurement best practices, we are promoting bundled bids. So we're also, when we're doing a bundled municipal bid, quite often through the local clean cities, we can reach out to private fleets. A lot of times we do that through NAPA, the National Association of Fleet Administrators, which is an organization that both public and private fleets are members of. So we can pull them to see if they need the same type of vehicle, and that would allow us greater aggregation and lower costs for everybody. In the procurement language that our partner Sourcewell will help you with, or the Clean Cities program will help you with, you want to make certain that whoever you're dealing with has valid emission regulation certifications. So that's either EPA or CARB for the current model year. We want to know in the specification that the vehicle is built to NFPA standards. That's the National Fire Protection Association. We want to know that the upfitter or installer has a direct relationship with the OEM so that the warranty is held through the OEM. If it isn't, we want to know who is responsible for what, so there's no questions or issues later on. And then we want to know who's in charge of training people for both maintenance and service of the vehicles. Next slide, please. Aftermarket retrofits. This is kind of the world that I live in. Most of these retrofits and companies that I've represented work directly through the OEM through what's called either a QVM program, Qualified Vehicle Modifier with Ford Motor Company, or an SVM program, Specialty Vehicle Modifier with General Motors. In this case, you go to your local dealer, whether it's a bus dealer or whether it's a commercial vehicle dealer, you order the vehicle and the dealer already knows who is authorized by the OEM to do upfits and develop systems. They place the order, the vehicle gets built, it gets drop shipped to one of these third parties for the natural gas or propane upfit. It gets put back into the delivery system to your local dealer. So you may or may not be aware of how this is done. You know more than your people who have not listened to one of these webinars, but you get your service and you get your delivery and your sale as one single contract through your local dealer. That dealer may be routing you through Sourcewell. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple slides, but the exception of this is heavy-duty repowers. A heavy-duty repower is taking out a diesel engine and replacing it with a cleaner diesel engine or a propane-powered engine or a natural gas-powered engine. That's done on a very specialized basis. Again, your local Clean Cities coordinator can point you in the right direction on that. Next slide, please. Stakeholders in this building process. On the left, you see an OEM. Just to the right of that, you see an aftermarket retrofit system manufacturer. This would be somebody like Westport on the natural gas side or Roush on the propane side. Directly below that, you see an aftermarket retrofit system installer. The installer may be the same company as the manufacturer, or it can be another independent third party that is again authorized directly by the OEM to install OEM approved systems. Go a little further to the right and you see you have body manufacturers and body installers. A typical body manufacturer may be somebody like Redding or Knapheide or Omaha. A typical body installer might be Fontaine in the Midwest. It might be Autoport in the Northeast or the Southeast, or it could be somebody like Knapheide or even a distributor like Zaresco in the Pittsburgh area. Go further to the right, you have your local auto truck dealer, and then all the way to the right is yourself. So the customer orders the vehicle through the local auto truck dealer. They get involved with the second stage body manufacturer installer. They get involved, again, the dealer gets involved with the retrofit system manufacturer and the retrofit system installer, and the dealer gets involved with the OEM. So the build flows from the left to the right. You being the customer in control, you flow from the right to the left. Next slide, please. Procurement pathways and decision points. The overarching process involves first the OEM manufacturer of the vehicle, as I mentioned. Second, the replacement of the conventional, that would be the gasoline or the diesel fuel system, with an alternative fuel system, and what we're talking about today running on either propane autogas or compressed natural gas. And then three, a customized vehicle body to suit specific needs. This would involve people like Redding and Knapheide. And then fourth, delivering the vehicle to the customer. And in virtually every case, that goes through the selling dealer. The process is, this is for light duty vehicles and some medium duty vehicles. It is a little bit different for heavy duty vehicles because there's a lot more customization, but perhaps that's another webinar. Next slide, please. The supply chain pathways vary with these considerations. One, who installs the aftermarket system? Remember, make certain that it is somebody that is authorized by the OEM to do the installation. And two, what other steps are necessary to prepare the vehicle to the purchaser specs? This is typically the gaseous fuel option ordered on the engine directly by the dealer. That's an option, just so you know, that costs somewhere between $300 to $400. It's not a very big expense. The rest of the presentation, we have a few more slides here that are going to show some different pathways for different types of vehicles. Next slide, please. Heavy duty vehicle procurement, next slide. In the heavy duty vehicle procurement process, I guess just start popping through these, Cameron, because there are multiple slides. Okay, first we have, well, you see on the left, there is a Class 8 tractor. This is a natural gas powered tractor. You can identify it because you see immediately behind the cab is what's called an I-box. Inside that cabinet are multiple fuel tanks. So the system is ordered from a truck manufacturer. This one appears to be a Volvo. It then goes through a fuel package integrator. People like Agility, Mainstay, Quantum, or Momentum, they manufacture high pressure packages. They then go back to the dealer for the installation of the low pressure system and then delivered to you. The next slide shows some specialty heavy duty vehicles. Go ahead and click through that, Cameron. So this would be a bucket truck, a refuse truck, or a dump truck. Again, it starts at the top with a truck OEM dealership. A truck OEM itself. They manufacture the truck. It goes to a fuel package integrator and then an upfitter. Almost the same people. There's not a lot of people in this industry, so you'll hear these names like Fontaine. Leach does packing systems. Easy Pack and Palfinger are the same thing for refuse trucks. Comes back to the dealer and goes to you. Again, it's very important for you to note that your first path is to go directly to the dealer and let the dealer assist you in the specification, and then let Sourcewell assist you in the specification because they've done a lot of this work. Next slide, please. Light and medium duty vehicle procurement. Let's click through this. In the case of Dodge offering, Dodge offers a Ram 2500 bi-fuel pickup truck. It'll run on natural gas or gasoline. It is built directly by Dodge, I believe, at a plant in Juarez, Mexico. So you as a customer can go into a dealership, order it directly through the dealer. It comes to them. Next slide. In the case of Ford and General Motors, you would order, again, the vehicle through a dealer. So let's start from bottom to top this time. So you go in and you order either a natural gas or a propane autogas vehicle. It gets ordered by the dealer. The order goes into the OEM. The OEM deals with a system manufacturer and or installer. Those examples would be Landy Renzo, Westport Fuel Systems, Eltec Eco, PSI, and Roush. Some of them offer both propane and natural gas. Some of them propane only, some of them natural gas only. Next slide. Here is a situation where There are third parties that represent multiple QVMs or SVMs. These are the people who have developed the systems. In this case, the OEM, Ford or General Motors, would build the vehicle once it's ordered through the dealership by you. It would be drop shipped to a facility depending where you're geographically located. That facility would be authorized by the OEM to install the natural gas or propane system. Examples of this are A1 Alternative Fuels, All Fuels International, Autoport, Zoresco, and GAS, Green Alternative Systems. Next slide, please. Here's an example with medium duty. This would be dump trucks or shuttle buses. Can be done the same way, but if you look on the left, you have companies like Autoport and Zoresco. They are authorized to install natural gas and propane systems, and they are all also authorized by the truck body manufacturers to install a Redding or a Knapheide service body. And then you go over on the right and you see service body providers like Knapheide, Redding, Morgan, and Utilimaster. In many cases, they are also authorized by the QVM system developer, the developer of the natural gas or propane system, to do the installation at their own facility. Again, you're at the bottom, you're the customer, you're dealing directly with the dealership. The dealership would push you to Sourcewell or elsewhere to do this procurement. So it's important that you have a good relationship with the dealer. Next slide. This is just another scenario that you may go to one facility that would install both the body shop and the propane or natural gas system. And again, this could be somebody like Zoresco. The other people listed here are Eco Vehicle Solutions, Green Alternative Systems, and J&J Truck Body. These are companies that are authorized to do the fuel system as well as the work body. Next slide. We have a few more events. We're almost done here, but the project officially ends, I believe, on September 14th. But there's a show coming up in Texas. If you're in the Texas area, please take a look at that. We have one final webinar that's probably going to be announced next week to talk about specific procurement contracts with our partner Sourcewell. And then we are putting together an updated guide for school bus procurement and best practices. And this is going to include the latest product offerings in propane, natural gas, and electric from Thomas, Bluebird, and IC. And then finally, Sourcewell, our procurement partner, is releasing a fleet services, a fleet management contract. So if you're a smaller fleet and you're interested in having a third party come in and manage your fleet that would already have knowledge of alternative fuels, that might be something you would like to consider. Next slide. Okay, this is it. This is the part where you are welcome to type in questions, and our organizer is going to put them out to myself and Sarah and Philip, and we will do our best to answer them. If you're shy and you would like to email either Philip or myself directly, our email addresses are on there, and I'm sure we will get back to you very, very quickly. Again, we have only about 4 minutes left, but I want to thank you for your time, and I hope that this was enjoyable and enlightening to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry and Philip. So yeah, if you would like to ask a question, just type it into the questions box in your control panel, and I'll give everyone a few minutes. we'll give everyone just another minute. Just a reminder, please type your question into the question box. We have one question on mobile fueling. At what rate can a person fill up a vehicle?
I'll take that. This is Barry. That really depends upon the supplier, the mobile refueler, but typically it's 4 to 6 gallons per minute in the case of natural gas. I think the propane might be a little faster than that, like maybe 5 to 7 gallons per minute. Again, there's multiple companies that offer this. It really depends on where you're at, what region of the country you're in. I know where I am in upstate New York, there's one company that does that. I know of a company up in New England that does quite a bit of it, and a company in the DC area that does it.
Thanks, Barry. Our second question is, they show sedans and SUVs as an option still for CNG, but this person is not aware of any new vehicles in either category available today. Are there any?
There are vehicles. You can get the full-size Ford offering, but this is the last year they're making it. But you can get the 5-liter Ford engine with gaseous prep in the Ford Explorer, and then the 6-liter GM engine, which is a V8, in the larger General Motors product, which I think is called the Sequoia or the Savannah. I'm not quite certain of that, but they do make it's a SUV vehicle that is available with gaseous prep, and there are companies that have valid EPA certifications to upfit them for propane or natural gas.
Thanks, Barry. Another question, do you have a vendor application package to become a Fleets for the Future vehicle or system provider?
Well, I better let Philip take that, but I can tell you that Sourcewell does on the Sourcewell side. And if you'd like to either email myself or Philip, we'd be happy to put you directly in touch with Sourcewell. Do you have any more information on that, Philip?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to frame things right now, given that the Fleets for the Future project, the grant-funded component of it, is ending within the next few weeks. The best path forward would be for us to help you connect with the various buying cooperatives around the country that are active in this space. Not only Sourcewell, but also HVAC Buy is very active. And we also have regions that are continuing on past the end of the grant, and they may be interested in getting you onto their either state bid list they've been working through or their regional procurements. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out to me and Barry, and we'll give you a list of folks that you should be talking to.
Thank you both. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. Maybe I'll give 10 more seconds. Any last questions? Please type them in.
3:01, I'm on overtime now.
Okay, then I guess, Sarah, do you want to just close us out?
Yep, thank you so much, Barry and Philip, and everybody for joining us. And just a reminder, you'll get an email with the link to the recording as well as the slides. And you can always visit our website, fleetsforthefuture.org, to learn more. And feel free to reach out to me or Barry or Philip with any of your questions, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.